නව ටොමෙක්ස් වැල්ලම් සහ විසබීජ අවම කර දින 3ක් දක්වා ටොයිලට් එක ෆ්‍රෙෂ්ව තමයි. ටොමෙක්ස්.
Tonight, heeding calls. After days of suspense, Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa bows to pressure and tenders his resignation. The tipping point. A brazen attack by pro-government mobs targeting peaceful anti-government protesters leads to countrywide chaos and displays of public anger. Shut down. An island-wide curfew is currently in effect in an attempt to ease public unrest. Helping out. The Bangladesh Bank announces a one-year extension of its bilateral swap agreement with Sri Lanka. All this and much more coming up tonight on First at 9, this Monday, the 9th of May, 2022.
Clear Ice Cool Menthol. Ishori walin thora lassana kes kalamak laba dei. Clear samagin than zero dandruff.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening, you're watching First at 9 with me, David Ebert. Now today, the 9th of May, that marked exactly 1 month since the start of the peaceful Gota Gogama protest at Golfis Green, will now be remembered as a day of shame. The peaceful protests that have since their inception become a beacon of unity and solidarity under one voice against the government was marred by an inhuman attack by pro-government supporters bussed in from across the island. What began as a meeting held at Temple Trees as a show of support for Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa turned into a pogrom against the innocent anti-government protesters camped outside and then moved on to target the Gota Gogama village at Golfis Green. In the end, the shocking attack carried out in the presence of heavy police and STF security led to at least 141 protesters injured and hospitalized. However, the attackers themselves were not spared in the aftermath, as Colombo residents, angered by the brazen attacks, focused their wrath on the government supporters who dared to enter the Colombo city and the buses they arrived in. This morning, the two main protest sites in Colombo, the Gota Gogama and Maina Gogama villages, prepared to mark a significant milestone. That is, 1 month since the main protest at Golfis Green grew from a gathering of anti-government protesters calling for an end to the month of shortages and for the resignation of the president and the government for their part in the mishandling of the country's economic crisis. However, what was supposed to be just another day of peaceful agitation became a battleground by midday. Busloads of pro-Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna supporters were transported into the commercial capital for a show of support for Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa, calling on the Premier not to resign, as he was expected to do today after the outcome of Friday's emergency cabinet meeting chaired by the President. Following a special meeting at Temple Trees with the hundreds of supporters from across the country, they then walked out of the Prime Minister's official residence with violence on their minds. Their first target was the Maina Gogama protest village set up outside Temple Trees. The government supporters descended upon the peaceful protesters and proceeded to cause physical harm and destroy the tents set up as shelters. The most shocking part of it, meanwhile, was that all the while, police personnel stationed there to maintain law and order looked on, unable to stop the attacks. After completing their task, the government supporters led by trade unionists Mahinda Kandagama, Moratuwa Mayor Samanlal Fernando and Puttalam District SLPP MP Piyal Nishanta led their mobs towards the main protest site at Golfis Green. Descending upon the site, the mobs then brazenly walked into the Gota Gogama village and began attacking the protesters. The tents that had been set up in the past month to provide shelter were torn down and set on fire. Even the medical tents and Gota Gogama library were not spared by the mobs as they proceeded to burn down and destroy whatever they could lay their hands on. And just as was the case outside temple trees, the police personnel stationed to prevent any violence were mere onlookers as the pro-government mobs continued to inhumanly assault innocent anti-government protesters with impunity. The reaction from the police's riot squad was, however, a tad too late, as most of the damage had already been done. When the water cannons and tear gas were finally put to good use, 23 Gota Gogama protesters were already assaulted and hospitalized. Some of the attacks caught by news cameras were seen as nothing short of inhuman. By this time, the anti-government protesters who were throughout the ordeal displaying a commendable sense of self-control were then seen ready to defend themselves by any means possible. In the meantime, the Kota Gogama site saw some unexpected visitors in opposition leader Sajid Premadasa in the company of Samagi Janabalawegiya MPs Eran Wickramaratne and Mujibur Rahman. However, their visit drew the ire of the protesters, who proceeded to turn them away from the site as their anger grew. The opposition politicians were forced to beat a hasty retreat under heavy security, while the opposition leader's personal vehicle came under attack and was seen damaged. In the meantime, with dozens of buses having transported the pro-government mobs into Colombo city having been parked at various locations across the city, local residents, shocked and angered by the brazen attacks, began to fight back. Several buses, identified as among those that transported the mobs into the city, were smashed up, and their drivers dealt with the same treatment as their passengers had dished out to the Golface and Temple Trees protesters. Some buses were also set on fire. From the bus signboards, it was shown that the buses had come from as far away as Ambedipitia in the Hambantota district. In the meantime, after carrying out their acts of violence at Golface Green, the pro-government supporters from outstation were left with no protection from Colombo residents and their own brands of justice. Accordingly, a group of pro-government supporters were seen having been thrown into the Beira Lake as punishment. Further, Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna aligned trade unionist Mahinda Kandagama, who had been at the centre of bringing in part of the mobs, was also caught out by some Colombo residents today as well. All in all, the day has been one that will go down in history as one of the darkest days in Sri Lanka's political landscape and seem to have finally led to a tipping point in the patience levels of the country's peaceful protesters and everyday citizens of Colombo. Now, Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa has tendered his resignation letter to President Gotabaya Rajapaksa this evening. In his letter, he said that he is ready to make larger sacrifices for the betterment of the people and the country and will support the all-party interim government as requested by the President during the cabinet meeting held last Friday. Prior to his resignation, Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna supporters arrived at Temple Trees to pledge their support to the Premier, calling on him not to resign.
Since political sources hinted at the possibility of the resignation of Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa since Friday after the emergency cabinet meeting headed by the President, it has been the biggest topic of discussion in the island. This afternoon, however, in the aftermath of the major outbreak of violence today, the Prime Minister's office officially announced that he has tendered his resignation to the President. In his letter to the President, the Premier says that he resigned from his position according to the request made by the President during the cabinet meeting held on the 6th of May 2022 with regard to the establishment of an all-party interim government as per the necessary provisions of the Constitution. Prime Minister Rajapaksa added that he was ready to make bigger sacrifices for the betterment of the people in the future. In conclusion, he also said that he hopes that all who propose the establishment of an interim government will accept any challenge the country will have to face in the future. However, the situation in the morning seemed to be different. With speculations that Prime Minister is going to resign during the day, supporters affiliated to the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna, including parliamentarians, party organisers and local government members arrived at the Temple Trees and engaged in a protest calling on the Prime Minister not to resign. Following this, the supporters then entered the Temple Trees to meet with the Prime Minister.
මේ මහ පොළොවේ දේශපාලනය කළ මට ඔබේ ජය සතුට වගේම දුක් වේදනාවත් හොඳින් දැනෙනවයි කියන එක මම ඔබට අමුතුවෙන් කියන්න ඕන නැහැ. ඒ නිසා පෙළපාලි උද්ඝෝෂණ හර්තාල් අපිට එදත් අදත් නුහුරු දේවල් නෙවෙයි. හැබැයි රටක් ආර්ථික අර්බුදයකට මුහුණ දෙන අවස්ථාවක අපිට වැදගත් වන්නේ ජනතාවගේ අභිවෘද්ධිය මිසක් පටු දේශපාලන අරමුණ වෙනුවෙන් ක්‍රියාත්මක වීම නොවේයි කියන එක ඔබ මතක තියාගන්න. ඒ වගේම සමහරු මේ ජනතා ප්‍රශ්න වලට මුවා වෙලා රට ආරාජික කරලා දැනට පාර කපමින් සිටින බවත් අපි අමතක කළ යුතු නැහැ. විරෝධතාවන් නැති වෙන්න පුළුවන්. එයාට විසඳුම් දෙන්න අපට මාවතක් තිබිය යුතුයි. ඒ විසඳුම් දෙනවා වෙනුව කියලා රටේ ව්‍යවස්ථාවට පිටුපාන්න අපි කාටවත් අයිතියක් නැහැ. ඒ නිසා මගේ ප්‍රතිපත්තිය නම් අභියෝගවලට මුහුණ දීලා අභියෝග ජය ගන්න උත්සාහ කරන එකයි. එහෙම නැතුව කවදාකවත් අභියෝග හමුවේ පලා යෑමේ සිරිතක් මට නැතයි කියන එක මම කියන්න ඕන මේ වෙලාව. ඒ නිසා අනාගතයට වැරදි පූර්වාදර්ශ නොදී ඉන්න එකයි වැදගත්. අද විරුද්ධ පක්ෂය රටේ ආර්ථික අර්බුදය මතින් තමන්ගේ දේශපාලන න්‍යාය පත්‍රයක් ගෙන යන බව රහසක් නෙවෙයි. ඕන අවශ්‍ය බලය විතරයි. අපි එකතු වෙලා රට ගොඩනගමු කිව්වත් ඒ ආරාධනාවට ඔවුන් පයින් ගැහුවා. ඒ වෙන විට මහානායක ස්වාමීන් වහන්සේලා කාදිනල්තුමා ශ්‍රී ලංකා නීතිඥ සංගමය ඇතුළු ඇතම් දේශපාලඥයින් ආ සිවිල් සංවිධාන සර්වපාක්ෂික ආණ්ඩුවක් යෝජනා කරනවා. ඒ අනුව එම යෝජනා කළ සියලු පාර්ශවයන්ට ඉදිරියේදී රටට මුහුණ දීමට සිදුවන අභියෝග බාර ගැනීමට ඉදිරිපත් වන ආකාරය අපට දැකගත හැකි වේවි. ඒ නිසා ජනාධිපතිතුමාටත් බාධාවකින් තොරව ඒ පිළිබඳ තීන්දුවකට එළඹෙන්න පුළුවන්. හැබැයි කවුරු හරි බලපෑමක් තොරව පොදු ජන යහපත වෙනුවෙන් යම් යහපත් ක්‍රියාමාර්ගයක් ගන්නවා නම් ඒ වෙනුවෙන් ඕනෑම පරිත්‍යාගයක් කරන්න මම සූදානම් කියන එක මම මතක් කරන්න ඕනේ.
In the meantime, an island-wide police curfew was declared following the tense situation that erupted in Colombo today. According to the President's media division, the curfew officially came into effect at 7 p.m. today and will be in effect until 7 a.m. tomorrow. The curfew was imposed at first throughout the Western Province. However, it was later revised to an island-wide curfew as there is no end in sight to the violence on the streets. In the meantime, all leave of police personnel of all ranks has been cancelled with immediate effect as tensions escalated in many parts of Sri Lanka following an attack on peaceful anti-government protesters. In a statement, the police media division said that the decision was taken to maintain public order amidst the current chaotic situation reported in the country. Accordingly, all police officers have been instructed to report to work with immediate effect. And we'll be back with more stories right after this short break. Do stay with us.
Big 3.
Welcome back. Now, envoys of multiple countries have condemned the attacks that took place today, disrupting what was a month-long peaceful protest at Golfis Green and the 15-day-long public dissent carried out in front of the Prime Minister's official residence. World Bank Country Director for Sri Lanka, Faris Hadad-Zervos, while condemning the attacks, said that those responsible for it only hinder the country's immediate economic recovery, making the task even more difficult for its development partners.
The diplomatic community took to Twitter today to deplore the violence that took place at the two main protest sites, the Golfis Green protest site and the Temple Trees today. US Ambassador to Sri Lanka Julie Chung in a post this evening condemned the violence against peaceful protesters and called on the government to conduct a full investigation, including the arrest and prosecution of anyone who incited the violence. She added that her sympathies were with those injured today and urged calm and restraint across the island. Meanwhile, the British High Commissioner to Sri Lanka, Sarah Houlton, also issued a strong condemnation of the violence against peaceful protesters today. High Commissioner Houlton added that the authorities have a responsibility to safeguard citizens' rights, to protect peacefully and to hold the perpetrators of violence to account. Further, the German ambassador to Sri Lanka and the Maldives, Holger Subert, took to the social media platform and called for restraint to be exercised by all sides. He said that the current developments hurt his heart and that what used to be an example of a well-functioning democracy with people peacefully exercising their right to free speech has turned into tense confrontation. Ambassador Subert called for calm and restraint from all sides, stating that violence is never a solution. In the meantime, Norwegian ambassador to Sri Lanka Trine Joranli Eskadal to condemn the violent attacks on the peaceful protests today. The Norwegian ambassador said that she was extremely distressed to see the events unfolding in Sri Lanka today and added that this was a violation of the people's right to exercise their democratic rights. She urged the government of Sri Lanka to show restraint and ensure the safety of everyone. Further, World Bank Country Director to the Maldives, Nepal and Sri Lanka, Faris Hadad-Zervos, also expressed concern over the violence in Sri Lanka. Zervos stated that the World Bank was deeply concerned with the perpetration of violence in Sri Lanka and went on to say that those responsible are only standing in the way of the country's immediate economic recovery and making the task even more difficult for development partners. Meanwhile, United Nations Resident Coordinator for Sri Lanka, Hannah Singha-Hamdi, while expressing concern over the clashes in the country today, condemned the violence and stated that this only risks further escalation. She went on to say that the police should protect peaceful protesters and use new emergency powers with restraint, and added that peaceful protests and dialogue are important to find a legitimate resolution to the current crisis. Apart from the international community, the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka has also issued a notice today condemning the violence directed at peaceful protests. The HRCSL stated that the failure of the police to prepare for this eventuality and prevent and manage the violence and destruction is a gross failure of public order. The Commission, through its notice, said that there must be an immediate inquiry into the matter.
Now, several residences of politicians have come under attack by members of the public in the aftermath of the assaults by the SLPP supporters targeting anti-government protests in Colombo. In addition, Polonnaruwa district parliamentarian Amarakirti Atukorala has reportedly died in a shooting incident that took place in Nittambo today.
An increase in violence towards the country's ruling politicians has been reported from several areas of the country today, following the attacks made by Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna supporters targeting anti-government protesters today. Further, the death of an SLPP parliamentarian, Amarakirti Atukorala, and his personal security officer has also been reported this evening during a shooting incident that took place in Nittambo. The shootout had taken place when the members of the public had stopped the MP's vehicle during a search for SLPP supporters that took part in the assault of peaceful anti-government protesters. It was reported that 6 persons had been injured in the shooting incident and all have been admitted to the Potopitiwala base hospital. Hospital sources later confirmed that a 27-year-old among the injured had succumbed to his injuries. CCTV footage secured from the nearby shop depicts the MP fleeing the scene with his security officer who was armed with a gun. Meanwhile, in Moratuwa, the residents of Moratuwa Mayor Samanlal Fernando, who had brought busloads of supporters to temple trees in support of Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa, has been set on fire by area residents. According to our area correspondent, the fire, however, was brought under control. Meanwhile, the residence of State Minister of Water Supply Sanat Nishanta, located in the Arachekattu area in Puttalam, has also been set ablaze by agitated public. The MP was also instrumental in bringing SLPP supporters to temple trees and was also seen among the mob that gathered outside the Prime Minister's residence. In the meantime, in Kurunagalam, the SLPP office of former Minister Johnston Fernando, who is a close ally of Rajapaksa family, was also attacked by the public. What's more, the public also attacked the residence of the former minister's hardline supporter, the mayor of Kurunagala Tushara Sanjeeva, as well. Further, the residences of Minister Dr. Ramesh Pathiranam, former State Minister Nimal Lanza, and Parliamentarian Thissa Kuttiarachi was also damaged during the day.
Now, in this backdrop, Defence Secretary General Kamal Gunaratne has urged the public to act peacefully and avoid violence as it worsens the problems in the country during an economic crisis. Speaking at a media briefing today, the Defence Secretary also said that the government expects to conduct an independent investigation into the incidents that occurred this morning.
ප්‍රථමයෙන්ම ඉල්ලා සිටිනවා අපේ රටේ ජනතාවගෙන් මේ වෙලාවේ කලබල කරන්න එපා. උදේ ඇතිවෙච්ච සිද්ධිය ගැන රජයෙන් අපක්ෂපාතී පරීක්ෂණයක් සිදු කරයි. ඉතින් ඒ නිසා මේ හැම කෙනෙක්ම අපේ රටේ ජනතාව, අපේ මිනිස්සු, අපේ කාන්තාවෝ, අපේ දරුවෝ, ඒක නිසා මේ කලබල කරන එක, ගහමරා ගන්න එක, ඒ වගේම දේපල, රජයේ දේපල සහ පෞද්ගලික දේපල දින තියෙන එක කරුණාකරලා නවත්තන්න. මේ පිට මිනිස්සුන්ගේ දේවල් නෙවෙයි, මේ හැම දෙයක්ම අපේ මිනිස්සුන්ගේ දේවල්. ඉතින් ඒක නිසා වෛරයෙන් ක්‍රෝධයෙන් මේ කටයුතු කරන්නේ නැතුව සාමකාමී වෙන්න, ඒ වගේම සාමය ආරක්ෂා කිරීම සඳහා පොලිසියටත් ත්‍රිවිධ හමුදාවටත් උදව් කරන්න. ඉතින් අපි දන්නවා ආර්ථිකමය වශයෙන් විශාල අර්බුදයකට පත් වෙලා හැම කෙනෙක්ම පීඩාවට පත් වෙලා ඉන්න වෙලාවේ තවත් ගහමරා ගන්න යන්න එපා. ඉතින් දැන් අද අග්‍රාමාත්‍යතුමා අස් වෙලා තියෙනවා, කැබිනට් මණ්ඩලය ඉවත් වෙලා තියෙනවා. ඉතින් අපි ඉදිරිය ගැන බලමු. එතෙක් අපිට මේ රටේ සාමය පවත්වාගෙන යාමටත්, නීතිය පවත්වාගෙන යාමටත් ත්‍රිවිධ හමුදාවටත් පොලිසියටත් ඔබ සියලු දෙනාගේම සහයෝගය ලබා දෙන්න කියලා මම ඉතාමත්ම කරුණාවෙන් ආදරයෙන් ශ්‍රී ලාංකික සියලු දෙනාගෙන්ම ඉල්ලා සිටිනවා.
විශේෂයෙන්ම මේ අවස්ථාවේදී ත්‍රිවිධ හමුදාව යොදවලා අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්නේ අපේ රටේ ජනතාව ආරක්ෂා කර ගැනීමටත්, රටේ දේපල ආරක්ෂා කර ගැනීමටත් අපි ත්‍රිවිධ හමුදාවක් වශයෙන් බැඳලා තිබෙනවා. ත්‍රිවිධ හමුදාව රටේ ජනතාව ආරක්ෂා කරගන්න කටයුතු කරන නිසා ඔබ මේ වෙලාවට බුද්ධිමත්ව හිතලා මේ අවස්ථාවේ ටිකක් සංසුන්ව කටයුතු කරන්න කියලා ඉතාමත්ම කාරුණික ඉල්ලා සිටිනවා.
Now, the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce has issued a statement expressing alarm over the violent attacks on protesters outside temple trees and at Galle Face. The chamber has also called on the government and the armed forces to take immediate action to prevent peaceful demonstrations being attacked. It has also called for an impartial investigation to be carried out to identify all individuals responsible and to hold them accountable. It adds that failure to take immediate action to protect the fundamental rights of citizens will result in grave repercussions on the maintenance of law and order and disrupt the ongoing initiatives to resolve the serious economic and political crises faced by the country. In the meantime, Archbishop of Colombo, His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjit, today called the Golf Face Green protest a clarion call for a new independence struggle that Sri Lanka has been journeying towards for the past 74 years. He added that Sri Lanka is badly in need of a system change in order for it to reach the economic recovery it requires.
මා කුඩා කාලේ අද්දුටු ඒ අහිංසක භවයේ සංස්කෘතිය හා සભ્યත්වය අද අප රට තුළ දකින්නට නොමැත. අප රට තුළ මේ නීතිය වල්වැදීමේ හා හෘද සාක්ෂිය මොට කර ගැනීමේ මෙන්ම ජාතීන් හා ආගමිකයන් අතර ඔවුන් කොටවා දේශපාලන බලය අත්පත් කර ගැනීමේ ක්‍රමවේදයද 2019 අප්‍රේල් 21 වෙනිදා සිදු වූ පාස්කු ඉරුදින බෝම්බ ප්‍රහාරවලට හේතු සාධක වූ බව මෙහි සඳහන් කළ යුතුමය. එවැනි විනාශයක පෙර නිමිති හා පැහැදිලි සංඥා ගැන දැනගන්නට ලැබුණත් එය වැළැක්වීම තරම් බුද්ධියක් හෝ වගවීමක් නැති නායක නිලධාරී පෙළැන්තියක් නිසා මුළු රටම එදා භයානක ආඝාතයකට ඇද වැටෙන්නට පටන් ගත්තා. එතනින් ඒ වැටුණු වැටීම අද වෙනතුරුත් වැටෙමින්ම පවතිනවා. මෙහිදී අප කිව යුතු තව එක දෙයක් තිබෙනවා. එනම් අවංකභාවය හා විනය නොමැති රටකට ආර්ථික ජයග්‍රහණයක් අත්පත් කරගත නොහැකි බවයි. සැකය වර්ධනය වී ඇත. සිස්ටම් චේන්ජ් හා නව ආරම්භයක් අවශ්‍ය වන්නේ යයි අවංකව සිතමි. ගාලු මෝදර දෙසින් එන්නේ ඒ නව නිදහස් සරගලයේ කාහල නාදයයි. මාධ්‍ය අද ඇතැම් ධනකුවේරයන් හා දේශපාලන ගැත්තන් වෙත ඇති වහල්කමින් නිදහස් කරගත යුතු වේ. මේ රට අවුරුදු 74ක කාලයක් මුළුල්ලේ ගිය ගමන දැන් අපි කෙලවර කළ යුතුය. ඒ සඳහා ඔබ සැමද දායක වනු ඇතැයි මා ඉත සිතින් ප්‍රාර්ථනා කරමි. මේ කතාවෙන් ඔබට ඔබගේ හිත රිද්දෙව්වා නම් කනගාටුව ප්‍රකාශ කරමි. නමුත් කියන්න තියෙන දේ සිත්තයි කියන්න ඕනේ කොහේදී හරි.
Now, a protest staged by residents of Slave Island last night stretched into the morning today as the people claim they have not received domestic gas cylinders for the past 8 days. The protest was, however, brought to an end today through the intervention of the police.
Over the past weeks, there have been many protests that have been staged by people frustrated by the lack of domestic LP gas cylinders. The severe dearth of forex in the country since December has now reached a new low, making it harder for authorities to procure domestic LP gas cylinders, fuel and other essential imported items. Many frustrated people continue to take to the streets demanding authorities to provide them with gas cylinders. A group of people who had been to a refilling station in Dematogoda in order to acquire a new cylinder of gas had been told that they were unable to meet the demands of the people. Irritated by the news, the people had proceeded to block the Dr. Danis Tamawat in Dematogoda, stopping the flow of traffic. However, the police then intervened and dispersed the people after having a discussion. In the meantime, last night residents in the area of Slave Island staged a protest, claiming that they had not received gas in the area by officials for 8 straight days. According to our reporter, the protest had continuously been carried out by the area residents until this morning. However, through police intervention, the crowds had been dispersed.
Welcome back. Now, the Bangladesh Bank announced that it has taken a decision to extend the payment period for a bilateral currency swap agreement made with Sri Lanka by 1 year. The main monetary body of the Bangladesh Bank stated that it had taken this decision in order to ease pressure on Sri Lanka's serious economic crunch brought on by a lack of foreign reserves.
Bangladesh has announced that it is extending the tenure of its bilateral currency swap agreement with Sri Lanka by 1 year. The decision was taken during a Bangladesh Bank board meeting that was chaired by the governor of the Central Bank of Bangladesh yesterday. The decision was reportedly taken after considering the forex crunch that Sri Lanka is currently facing at the moment. One of the bank's officials stated that the Central Bank of Sri Lanka will enjoy a 9-month extension of the currency deal for 3 installments. The Central Bank of Bangladesh provided a total of $200 million to help raise Sri Lanka's fast depleting forex reserves and ease pressure on its exchange rate. As per the agreement, the CBSL has already deposited an equivalent amount of its currency with the Bangladesh Bank account, which has already been opened in a SAARC member country. This comes in the backdrop where Sri Lanka has temporarily suspended foreign debt payments to avoid a hard default.
And that's all the news we have for you tonight. We hope you join us again tomorrow at the very same time. Good night.